Hey friends, welcome back. So, want to give you an update. What's going on in financial markets today? I'll share my thoughts. I want to get yours as well. And the first thing that really popped out to me is that it appears that the wealth gap between rich and poor keeps getting larger. So, this isn't a shock or a surprise, but it sort of showed up in the earnings reports from some big companies. So, for example, today Nvidia reported earnings. You probably wonder, like, why is the stock down in the after hours? Well, essentially, their growth is slowing. So, they still make money, they're still profitable, no problem there, but they're just not growing like they once were. So, for example, I think last year compared to this year, their revenue basically doubled, which is like pretty nuts. But going into next year, maybe it's going to be flat. I think it says something like plus or minus 2%. So that is something that is tough to do for companies that have been growing like nuts to keep growing at that same record paces. The other issue as well with, and that's sort of essentially why the stock went down, because it's priced to keep growing like nuts, and it looks like it's not necessarily. The other thing too is there's an official statement from the company. They said here, I'll read it to you guys. Quote, AI is transforming every industry, company, and country, which I think is interesting. AI is transforming every industry, company, and country. So like everywhere, basically they're trying to say. They also say, quote, industrial robotics investments are surging with breakthroughs in physical AI, and countries have awakened to the importance of developing their national AI and infrastructure. So at least according to Nvidia, I still think they're getting lots of orders. They can't even keep up with all the orders that they're getting, and if they could, but they probably even make even more money. But it's tough to grow at these crazy paces. Nvidia's price, I just looking at the PE, I think it was like 65, something like that. So it's still very, very rich, but I understand that they are the market leader. Some of the challenges for them going forward is, what is the competition going to be doing? Is Intel and AMD ever going to catch up? What about Chinese competitors? This is a quote from their CFO. Again, this is Nvidia. They say here, quote, we expect the market in China to remain very competitive going forward. So I would imagine that eventually, right, this will just happen. China will figure out a way to make these things cheaper. I don't know about better, but I think they'll definitely try to make these things cheaper and try to put those things out there and compete. At the moment, though, Nvidia is clearly the leader. One thing they can't really say much about, this is a real, they're under investigation for monopoly. I'm talking about Nvidia here, so we'll see how that ends up playing out. If there's any shenanigans going on, if there's going to be penalties for that. So that's probably your biggest concern. Competition, right, is coming. How it will ever be effective to compete with Nvidia, who knows? And then your investigation. There's another thing that was interesting as well was they're saying they're going to have to pay their employees more money going forward. It says Nvidia said its operating expenses rose 44% due to higher compensation and benefits, right? So you hire more people. This is a hot industry. You're going to have to pay them a lot of money, probably, give them good benefits. And I think there's probably a possibility too that other companies, right, if you're falling behind, you need talent on your side. So maybe they're trying to poach employees from Nvidia and just keep these people well paid, and they're not going anywhere. So that's going to cost you. So that'll eat in their margins. Nvidia's margins are still very, very good. They're like in the 70s. So again, they're profitable. They're doing fantastic. They're just not growing like what they were. So essentially, that's why the stock is down, because it was priced to grow even further. One thing, though, I will say that is going to grow also even further is my book called Positive Angle. And if you're looking for a gift for yourself or someone you care about for Christmas, pick it up. It's Positive Angle, and it's on Amazon. I don't talk about it all day, every day, but I think you'll like it if you like the channel. Just wanted to mention that to you guys. Also, Target. So on the negative note, so Nvidia's doing great. They're making money. But Target not doing so great. Their stock went down. I think it was like some crazy number, like 20% in the after hours. And essentially, their earnings disappointed, right? So these are some of the things that we're talking about that was interesting. It says here, executives talking about Target here. There was weakness in sale items beyond essentials, right? So they had weakness in groceries. That was also, as they said, there were cost pressures. The company lowered profit guidance for the current fiscal year, reversing the rise to the outlook made in August. So, last year they were saying, hey, things are going to be fantastic. And they said, oh, the earnings report, maybe not so fantastic. This is even a quote here. It says, as we sit here today, we're confident we have the right assets. That's what they say, the right strategy, and the right team in place to attain strategic and financial goals. That's what they say, but I guess they have declining sales and clothes, which is kind of interesting because the weather was warm this year, so they had to stock a bunch of winter clothes and not selling so great on that because no one needs winter clothes. And we've had a very similar thing here in Busan where it's just warm. We're like, I was looking at the calendar here. We're like November 21st, and we were talking about this past week. Like, it was November 1st and it was still warm, and now we're like past mid-November and it's still fairly warm. It is a little bit cooler, but we don't have to wear like down jackets. And I'll let you guys know when we have to start wearing like gloves, down jackets, that kind of stuff. Usually, Busan is not that cold, but maybe for like a month or 2 months, you might have to get just really cold. But again, it's not at all. So that definitely hurts sales. And I'd be curious in your neck of the woods if it's the same for you guys. Like, have you bought your gloves and your new jackets for this year? Or are you, essentially corroborating what Target is saying to where they stocked all this winter stuff and no one's buying? They also said there's softness in home decor and also electronics and toys. It's fascinating to look at sort of how Target reports because it gives you a sense of what the consumer's doing. Now, even though Target struggled, Walmart was doing much, much better than Target. So I think Walmart stock was up, Target stock is down. This was another thing as well, is that they have to worry about the strikes. So they have the longshoreman strikes. So that's people who move the crates off the big ships, and they're probably going to strike again in January. So that's not necessarily a done deal. I'll wait till January if that happens. But this will definitely affect these big box retailers like that. This is another quote from Target. They said, when we take in product early, right? So if you're worried about strikes or say Trump tariffs, you start ordering early. So that's what they say. When we take in product early, that means we hold it a bit longer. We usually touch it a bit more, and that comes at a cost, both in distribution centers and our store back rooms. So that's actually really interesting, to where you're trying to plan ahead for the future by ordering stuff, but then you got this problem with say storage. And if a lot of stores end up doing this, or I should say chains or companies start ordering a bunch of things ahead of time to get ahead of the tariffs. To get ahead of the possible supply chain problems with the longshoreman strike, you could see a rise in storage costs. I think that could be a real thing. Overall, though, Target's not doing great. That's why stock is down so much. They also say here, quote, I think we have the appropriate approach to the holiday season based on some of the trends we are seeing year to date. We are guiding with some conservatism, right? Hoping there will be some upside as we get into the season. But then it's funny because like the stuff they say and the stuff they're doing isn't necessarily exactly matching, because they said they're going to cut prices on 2,000 items during the holiday shopping season. And that'll include some food and essential stuff as well as gifts. They actually talked about this before. I think it was like, I don't know, 3 or 4 months ago, where they're saying they had to cut a whole bunch of prices as well. Generally speaking, if you're cutting prices, that means you're having a weakness in your consumer. They have a demand problem, and that will definitely hurt your bottom line, right? Thins out your margins. McDonald's is reporting a very similar thing as well. They're going to be offering, I guess, next year, McValue meals, essentially what they're talking about. I remember when I was a kid, it was all about the Happy Meals, right? We're all happy, we're getting those toys and stuff like that. But I guess McDonald's going forward is sort of which I would say like a representation of sort of where we are as an economy. And instead of being happy, now we're just looking for value. Basically, it's gonna be a $5, value thing, and I guess you can get an add-on for like another buck. So I guess it ends up being $6, and that's probably not including tax. So then your meals end up, $6 or whatever. But I've actually noticed it here in Korea as well. My wife and I talk about we basically don't never go to McDonald's, but they've been offering sales as well at lunch. And it becomes, to be very frank, it becomes tempting, right? So I don't mean to sound like a McDonald's commercial, but because generally speaking, the stuff's not healthy. Plus, you have E. coli concerns in USA, so we haven't had that here in Korea. So, but we do have sales, so I think they may be struggling as well here in Korea. This is something else. This is a quote from McDonald's. They said, you need at the foundation to have a strong value proposition. So again, they're talking about value to customers. Interesting. And that's been the focus for us in a number of our markets, either strengthening, adding to, adjusting our value programs. So we have that good foundation. It also says here, coming from McDonald's, you need then to overlay on top of that food news that can excite the customer, and you have to have great marketing behind it. And actually, yeah, they here, and you'll see it on TV right now, they pay big name stars to work for them. And I don't know about McDonald's these days. In USA, you guys can tell me like if they're paying any big name people. When I was a kid, I think it was like Michael Jordan kind of stuff, like the most expensive you could get. I don't know who they're paying these days, but marketing's a big part of them, right? Also says here, and when you do that with news and great marketing, you can get strong, full margin check that goes along with some value programs. So that's actually really interesting. Target and McDonald's is basically struggling to get customers in, so you got to cut prices. That's the story there. Then you have a story with Boeing, which actually represents sort of what's going on with American companies as a whole. And this was actually the quote from Boeing. They got a new CEO, and you guys know Boeing has all sorts of crazy problems. They're getting killed by Airbus. Essentially, and also their products aren't good. Their doors are falling off. But this is the quote. It says, "We are at a low here, folks." That is the quote from the CEO. "We are at a low here, folks. We spend more time arguing amongst ourselves than thinking about how we're going to beat Airbus." Wow, that's a pretty nasty quote. Also says here, "Everybody is tired of the drumbeat of, quote, what's wrong with Boeing? I'm tired of it, and I haven't even been here that long." So that's the new Boeing CEO, Kelly Ortberg. So let's see if they can turn it around there. Let's hope so. I mean, it certainly would be a good thing to have a American manufacturer that can make decent planes. They're also concerned about a trade war with China. So I guess he was meeting with Trump already because they sell planes to China. So this affects all companies. Also in the markets today, we had a couple corruption stories. And I was thinking about this of like, why isn't Musk I sort of how can where to say it? Like, why isn't Musk, or how better way to say it, well, how is Musk getting away with corruption when other people are getting charged? And because Musk doesn't get charged with corruption, but right now it's like out in the open with Trump. You guys know this. He gave like, was it 180 million or something like that? It's something in that nature of to the Trump campaign, and then now he's like has got his own department thing going on with the Doge stuff, and he's getting maybe more contracts, stocks going up on Tesla, and people are kind of expecting corruption with that, and people are celebrating, which is kind of crazy. I mentioned the corruption stuff because this is one. It was Adani. You guys remember this is like the Indian billionaire dude, and there was a short report on him. Was that like a year ago or something? It was like, I think it was Hindenburg, and stock basically took a major dive. Now they're getting charged in the USA for bribery. This was the headline: Adani indicted in U.S. for alleged bribery scheme. Prosecutors accused billionaire and others of lying to investors and offering millions in bribes to land lucrative contracts. And I was thinking about this as like, and here they're saying 250 million in bribes. I was thinking like, how is this guy getting caught, but Musk is getting away with it? Here, it sounds like that essentially the banks were not on board with the scam. I think that's the difference. Whereas with Musk, the banks are on board with the scam, and the scam it would be say Twitter or Tesla, that kind of stuff. So they're actively promoting Musk. So whereas I don't think the Indian stuff they were necessarily actively promoting it, and so the banks were not thrilled about that. That's the only thing I could think of, or maybe the bribes to the banks didn't pay off as well. I don't know, but it just seems like when I was reading about this stuff, like you're paying off government officials to get, but although I guess the difference would be you're paying off government officials in India to get contracts. So, and then the US banks are involved because they're part of the funding of this stuff. Guys, money flows all around the world. So there's that. And then I guess the Adani people, he likes to hire a lot of his family members to run different parts of his company. You also had this one too. This was the Archegos thing, Bill Huang. So if you don't know, he got 18 years in prison. So that is a pretty sizable sentence for a white collar crime. I'm not saying you shouldn't sentence them. I'm just saying sometimes white collar crimes aren't really punished that much. The judge even mentioned FTX in the Sam Bankman-Fried, who got 25 years as being something a similar kind of thing. If you don't know, the Archegos deal was basically this dude borrowed a bunch of money, so he was on leverage to buy a bunch of stocks, and then he borrowed more money on the leverage stocks to borrow yet more and basically become a big borrowing scheme. And then I guess the banks were upset because they didn't know that he was so over leveraged. At one point, he had like $30 billion under asset management. And then when things start to crash and you're like crazy over leverage, then things can go sour in a big hurry, and banks lost money. So again, it's interesting like how Musk can get away with, because I was reading through the stuff and it's actually very similar to Wong or Adani, but Musk just keeps on going. But to be fair to Musk, he did say that if Trump were not elected, he would go to prison. So, maybe that was his game plan of why he's not sort of getting caught. Other issues as well is actually Ford is firing. It says 14% of European jobs. I think that's actually pretty big news. This was related to their EVs. They're just not selling. I think this is in Germany. Yeah. The other issue is as well, and I'd just like to give you guys an update of sort of what's going on in the world. UK is firing yet more missiles into Russia. This time it's using British-made ones. They're called the Storm Shadows. and there's talk they might be using the French ones. So these are major concerns going forward. What's going to happen with the war. We got the new president coming into power. I like to talk about all this stuff with you guys on the channel. I hope you guys find this stuff interesting. And for me, it's following markets, it's following business news, following culture, following politics. They're all connected. If you don't necessarily want to, worry about stock picking, these kind of things, you're best off just buying an index fund, and then you sort of capture what the market is doing. My particular opinion on all this stuff right now is I remain cautious. I think some of these things like your Nvidias are overpriced. That's just my opinion. And then when you find that the lower part of the consumers are struggling, be it McDonald's or Target, that these for great concern. The market can still do well, and the economy can still do well if the upper classes still continue to spend money and everything's going great with them. So if everyone's buying AI and their companies are doing great. But the problem is though is that this whole model though seems to be leaving a lot of people behind, and I think you're going to have a lot more sort of divide between rich and poor. And we literally just saw it with earnings reports today. And so that's why I sort of mentioned that stuff. And I want to make this really clear. We talk about a lot, with this divide. This is just how it is. If you want to take advantage of the system, you have to basically take ownership in companies and not just be a consumer. Being a consumer, being a worker is part of the system, right? Part of the economic system. But if that's essentially how you gain wealth is by taking ownership, that's what you need to do. And one thing you do is you buy index funds. The other thing you can do as well is you can buy bonds, you can pay off your debt, right? Make sure your job is secure, because when I see everybody say layoffs, and I see it a lot these days, I just worry about how you guys are all doing. And so I always like to hear about in your industry what's going on with you. I think one of the big ones, and that's going to be happening with, say, the longshoreman strike. And remember, Nvidia was saying, hey, companies, countries, whatever, are all going to be investing in AI. That's actually a big sticking point in the longshoreman strike, is like, hey, promise us that you're not going to replace us with AI. Otherwise, we strike today. Because many industries, yes, they're going to be going that way to automation, but they're not ready to do it yet. So they still need humans. And if the humans don't want to play nicely, right, essentially, if humans are, just crazy ideas of wanting to have jobs and foods on their table, then that's really going to hamper the situation. So I think you're going to have this really interesting dynamic going forward, to where you'll have this sort of Wall Street pushing for replacing a bunch of people. And then you have real people on the ground who are like, hey, but what about us? And that's something that I think we'll be talking about for, probably years to come. So anyway, thanks for watching, guys. And I'll catch you on the next video.